Absolutely nothing beats windshield time, a road trip, and good conversation in the car. Welcome to another episode of Dan the Road Trip Guy, where we have entertaining conversations about cars and road trips, life lessons, and maybe every now and then a little advice. I'm your host, Dan Neal, road trip extraordinaire, and now buckle up and enjoy the show. I am excited for my virtual road trip today. My guest is Adam Andretti. He is the son of the late Aldo Andretti, who was the twin brother of Mario Andretti. He's a racer himself, comes from a racing family, of course, and I'm just looking forward to learning a little bit more about him on this trip. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it, Dan. I'm really excited to be here and proud to be a part of the show and take this road trip with you. And, for me, I was blessed to be born into the Andretti racing family. My father is Aldo Andretti, which is Mario's identical twin brother. I'm his youngest son, but that also makes me Mario's nephew, Michael's cousin, John's little brother, Marco's second cousin, Jarrett's uncle. There's a lot of us that participate in the racing game and enjoy this sport like we do and are blessed by it. I've been blessed to be racing since I was 15 years of age. I continue to race professionally. I'm 44 years old, and I continue to race professionally in the Trans Am series and play around a little bit in USAC Dirt Midgets and at Chili Bowl and a few select events throughout the year. And I'm typical Andretti. I'd like to drive anything I can get my hands on and put my feet on the pedals of.
I was thinking about a question the other day, and I was like, when the Andrettis get together, do they talk about anything besides cars, racing, and going fast?
It's funny. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's kind of like the last thing that we'll have on the subject matter because so much of our life, that is our lives. Not to say that we don't talk about it. I'd be definitely, leading you guys down the wrong path. But, our topics, like any other family, are world events, politics, try and solve the world all at once. And then, if we have time for it, we talk about racing.
Just a normal family that goes racing, right?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And that's it. Not to say racing's super important, and we, especially during the racing season, we'll talk about a lot more, but, we spend a lot of time with each other in the off season. And when it's the off season, it's kind of good to decompress. It's important. My Uncle Mario said it to me this summer that the longevity of his career, he feels, came from his ability to decompress, that he separated himself. He took time to relax and to get away from it, stayed in hotels, didn't stay at the motorhome at the racetrack, stayed outside the racetrack so he could get a break from it. And he said, he goes, I think that's why I had the longevity and enjoyed it for as long as I did, is because I was able to separate and have a life.
Hey, so this is Dan, the road trip guy, and one of my favorite questions to ask people is, what was your first car? Your street car, not your race car, your street car.
Yeah, no, I had my sister was gracious enough, my oldest sister. So there's a big separation in our family. There's 5 kids with my mom and dad. Carolyn, Mark, John, the oldest 3, are 18, 17, and 16 years older than me. So my oldest sister, Carolyn, when I was turning 16, she had just come fresh out of law school and actually had bought a BMW 5 Series from my brother John. It was his wife Nancy's car. So when she bought that, the timing was just right. She gave me her car, which was about as sweet as you can imagine from an older sister. And that car was a Plymouth Sundance turbo.
Oh boy!
Had 5-speed manual gearbox, so a 3-pedal car, which you would expect an Andretti to start out with something like that. And it was bright red and a typical Andretti. I jumped up the boost and played with things and made more power out of it. But it was a fun little car, nothing special, but it was mine. And it was something I had always enjoyed when I was riding with my sister Carolyn throughout those years that she had it, and for her to, hand it over to me. And we did some things like put a Momo steering wheel on it and high performance tires. And, my dad and I, we had fun making the car something that a teenage Andretti would really enjoy.
Yeah, you gotta make it a little more racy, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, you just can't. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's very rarely that we run something stock. That we get something we don't start immediately playing with it of some sort.
Nothing better than hand me down from a sibling, also.
Yeah, it was. I'll never forget it. It was pretty special because, at that time we're like trying to figure out what we're going to do for a car. And as a 16-year-old, you're like, I don't want to spend any money. I just want a car. And,
Yeah.
so it was a wonderful, wonderful gift that I'll never forget.
Now, are you the youngest in the family?
I am. Yeah. I'm the youngest of the five. And like I said, there's the older three, and then there's a 12-year separation between my brother John and my sister Mary Jo. And then there's a 4-year separation between my sister Mary Jo and myself.
Yeah. So you kind of grew up as an only child then in the house, I guess, right?
That's kind of why, honestly, why I was born. It was funny. I used to, when I would go through my intro, I would joke and say I was, Aldo's youngest. I'm his last mistake. My brother John, he was laughing when he heard me say that once. He goes, you're the only five of us that they meant to have. The first three were a surprise. And then my sister Mary Jo, 12 years later, was a surprise. And my mom and dad, not wanting her to be raised as an only child, they tried for 4 years to have me, and my mom was in her mid 30s at the time, and they weren't in the 70s. They weren't exactly motivating a woman in their mid 30s to get pregnant. My mom was like, yeah, I'm a healthy young woman. I'm going to try this out. So here I am, on the result of that. So my brother, yeah, he got a kick out of it. He goes, you're the only one that they meant to have.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Good story. Hey, take me on a memorable road trip that you had in your life. Just one that, stands out. Maybe it was with family. Maybe it was on the racing circuit. Just one that just really memorable to you.
Well, as I told you before, I live in the motorhome, so we have a lot of great road trips, my wife and I. But one that really sticks out in my memory, I was in high school. I would not have my driver's license yet. My sister Mary Jo that I just mentioned was attending Purdue University. So we would go out to Pennsylvania every year for Christmas, to spend with family, with not only my Uncle Mario and that side of the family, but also the grandparents. Both my mom's parents and my dad's parents lived in Pennsylvania. So, it was just a pilgrimage every year. One year, because of my sister's work schedule, she couldn't really leave when mom and dad were leaving. So mom and dad agreed that if I would ride with her, that they would let her, come out on, later. So her and I saddled up, and she had a Chrysler LeBaron.
Okay.
And I don't know if you remember those, but
I do.
Yeah, she had a Chrysler LeBaron, and we saddled up in that thing. And so I'm 15 and she's 19 years old, and we're getting ready to bolt, a third of the way cross country here to Pennsylvania from Indianapolis. And we laughed hard. We still laugh about it because at one point I think we drove for like 40 or 50 miles with the distance till empty on the computer screen there. That the distance till empty was at 0.
Okay.
We were out of gas. We couldn't find a gas station. So for like 40 miles, and we're laughing, like trying to make the best and I told her, I said, you got to go a little slower so that we don't burn as much fuel. And so she's slow with the hazards on, and people are flying by us on the highway, and we're just waving like, yeah, we're out of gas. We're out of gas. Stop if you see us because we're out of gas. And but yeah, we had just an awesome 10-hour trip, safe and sound into Pennsylvania, and but yeah, that was one of my more memorable road trips, I'd say.
I don't know. There's something fun about seeing how close you can get to 0. When I was growing up, it was just a gauge, so you didn't really know. Okay, it's close to E, but how close is that?
Yeah, I mean, this was a really high tech car for the time. It was a 1987 LeBaron, but it had all the computer gadgets that you find in today, right? With like I said, the miles per gallon and the distance to empty and all those things. And one thing I didn't know about a fuel light on a car, right? So
Right.
The fuel light comes on with 2.5 gallons left. That is a mandate. That's an international mandate. So with 2.5 gallons left, you'll have a fuel light come on. Through that, I was able to give us a pretty good educated guess with that knowledge to know, because the car also gave us our miles per gallon, to know how many miles we could actually go with the thing on 0. So it was one of those things where it went to 0 as well when the fuel light came on, and that was 2.5 gallons. So it was like at 0 was, hey, getting your attention. You better find something because you're basically about to be on fumes. But that car was like, if I remember correctly, that car was in the high 20s for fuel economies. With 2.5 gallons left, we had about 60 miles roughly, and I think we did like 40 or 50 before we found a gas station.
Yeah, there you go. You've already told us you are a racer, and tell me how you got into racing.
Well, my brother John, my first memory is, like most of us, around 4 years old, and my first memories are very vivid of not only go-karts being warmed up in the garage and that smell of two-stroke. And that's such a favorable smell to me, even to this day. Like, it's one of those things where that you had just a special moment in your childhood with that, because when you smell it today, it brings joy to you. For me, it does. And then 4 years old, I remember my brother John specifically. He won the USAC Regional Midget Championship. I just remember every night, even on the rough nights, him coming back, and there was just enjoyment in the job. When you're 4 years old, you don't know that you're an Andretti. You don't even care that you're an Andretti. I was just enamored by the speed of the sport and how happy it made my brother who was doing it, right? And from that moment on, that's all I could ever think about. That's all I ever thought about. In school, daydreaming, no matter what has gone on in my life, it's racing has been central. And I haven't always been able to race. I got kind of started relatively late. And, as far as racers go, I was 15 years old when I first started racing. That's not when I first started driving. My dad taught me to drive, as early as age 9. But it was at that point, my brother John's career was really taking off. Weekends were kind of used up following that career. And so for us to go racing, it really wasn't an option. And until I got older and John's career had planted itself and he was cemented in, and no longer, did he, that support system that is so helpful, was no longer a severe necessity. Then, the opportunity came for me to get to go race, and I've never looked back. Even in the down years where I couldn't find employment driving race cars, I was able to work in the automotive industry, coaching people that have just bought exotic cars that want to learn how to drive them, coaching people that they want to become race car drivers, and teaching them the basics, and then taking them to the next level, advancing them, and seeing if they get to a point that they can be licensed to race at a high level. So through all that, I kept myself in the circle. I was always at racetracks. Even if I didn't have a ride, I was always at racetracks. I was always driving something. I was always doing something to work on my craft. And in the last 10 years, I've been blessed in the Trans Am series. I found a wonderful home there. It was always a goal of mine to get to Trans Am. I'm a 6 foot tall Andretti, which, if anyone knows anything about my family, that may be an average height for an American man, but it's not an average height for an Italian American man in this family. So at 6 feet tall, when I was a teenager, all my family was like, "You're not going to fit in an Indy car," because it's like that's where we all wanted to go, was IndyCar racing, Indy 500, and said, "You better think about the Trans Am series or Peterbilt trucks or something." And so Tommy Kendall, super super tall, super fast, and he was kicking their butt in Trans Am at the time. Trans Am became a serious target, not only for that reason, but it's literally the only professional form of motorsport or of car racing that no one in my family had ever done.
Okay.
And so I felt like it was an area that I could go, a rare area that I could actually go and make a name for myself. You're always going to be in a little bit of a shadow, with this family. But, if you're racing in a series that they've all competed in, won championships in, and done all that, then you really, it's very difficult to break out of that. But with the Trans Am series, I've been able to make my own name for it in there, and it's a wonderful paddock. It's an awesome group of people, and they've treated my wife, just incredibly well. All of my family, my mom and dad, when they were here, and they would come to the races, and the way they would get treated, it was it's just real special to me. So it's been a wonderful home there, and I look forward to ending my career in the Trans Am series someday.
Well, and you mentioned before we started that racing is a lot about connections. And so you talk about you stayed in that circle. No matter what it looked like, you were still around it.
That's right. And when you're coaching these individuals, they have a lot of those individuals that I'm coaching, they have the money to make my dreams come true.
Sure.
And if they really enjoy what you're doing with their coaching, then whatever they might want to do in motorsports going forward, because once the bug bites you, it's really kind of hard to not itch the bite, and So when you get these people and the bug has bit them and they start, then you're on their radar, okay, as a driver, because they know that you don't have a drive. So that's really kind of how a lot of it worked out for me in the Trans Am series. Was ECC Motorsports. AJ Hendrickson was a good friend of mine, and I had actually met him through my wife, because my wife was really close friends with who he was dating at the time. So I got to meet him. And then he started road racing. He had always done nothing but ARCA racing, and they started road racing in Trans Am. I told him, I said, when you go to these racetracks, call me. I said, because I'll coach you over the phone. You tell me where you're struggling, and even over the phone, I'll be able to help you. So a couple of the races I did that, we helped him out a bunch. He was so impressed by that. He brought me out for a test. And I'll never forget, we're testing, and I said, what kind of lap time would you like to see out of me by the end of the day? And he told me, he goes, if you get here by the end of the day, I'll be really impressed. And like, fifth lap in, I turned that lap time.
Nice.
And was underneath that lap time the rest of the time. And at a track I'd never been to. It was a club track called Autobahn up in Chicago. I literally had never been there. And it was my first day there, and I'm already running super competitive speeds. His dad and him, he's like, do you want to go Trans Am racing? I go, you have no idea how bad I like to do that. So we went off and won Rookie of the Year and almost won the championship the first year out in 2014. And 2015, we took the championship down to the wire again. I think we finished second, only like 5 points behind on that. So we had really competitive years, won a lot of races, broke a lot of track records, sat on a lot of poles. And that's really how all that triggered, was from coaching, was simply by keeping myself, as you said, keep my foot in the door by being a coach, and it takes a lot of swallowing your own pride, because all we want to do is race. So if it's not a drive, it seems like it takes you further away from your dream. And I couldn't encourage others more, I know so many wonderful, talented drivers out there that's how they've gotten their break, is by coaching.
And then, some people don't know, but your dad was also a racer. He had an unfortunate accident, and I think he swung into the business world, is the way I read it. But I love the story that they flipped a coin and he went out and won that first race back when he and your uncle were racing. And then the next weekend, Mario won and went out and won the race. So just cool story.
Yeah, my dad would say they either won or crashed. And in 1960, my mom put together a scrapbook that I found. Really cool, because she was only 18 years old. So it's totally like a teenage girl's scrapbook.
Sure.
But she did a scrapbook, and the newspaper clippings say the same thing. Yeah, the Andretti twins, they're exciting to watch, because if they're not winning, they're up to some sort of shenanigans, spinning or crashing or whatever, keeping it exciting. But yeah, that's they either won or crashed. But yeah, so the coin toss, was funny about that is Mario actually won the coin toss, but it rained out the first week.
Okay.
So my dad was the first to actually race, and like you said, and the rest is history. He won, and then Mario won the next week, and that year though, at the end of the season, my dad had his first bad accident in 1959. He flipped multiple times down the back straightaway and broke his helmet off his head and put him in a 3-day long coma. It was a pretty bad deal, that he went through there. It took him kind of almost a year to recover fully from that. Even my mom's stories, she would tell of the atrophy and the small amount of time that he was hospitalized, that he came to pick her up on a date. He couldn't even barely work the clutch car to drive it. And that's how weak he was after that accident. But he bounced back and raced for the next 9 years, and then in 1969, the accident you're speaking of in Des Moines, Iowa, sprint car racing back in those days was incredibly dangerous. They had a 30% survival rate. I don't think there's any modern job out there today that has a 30% survival rate, and that's what they were dealing with. So it was extremely dangerous, and the reason they didn't have protection, right? They had no roll cages, they had open face helmets. He caught a rut and it broke the front axle, dug in, and he started barrel rolling across along the catch fence, and the poles that hold up the catch fence were striking him in the face. He shattered 13 bones in his face, and that's what ended his career. He retired at that point in 1970 and went into, him and Mario had the Firestone store here in Speedway, Indiana, and then when they sold that, he opened up Associated Sales, which was a distribution center here in Indianapolis. And then he got out of that in the early 80s and bought a machine shop and had the machine shop for 20 some odd years up until, he was ready to fall out of the business world and relax.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. We'll switch up a little bit with you. And what's on your bucket list in life? Something you want to get done?
I would love to hike the Appalachian Trail from tip to tail. I think it's something I've always wanted to do. It's an incredible challenge. I love the outdoors. And the Appalachian Trail has always been on my radar because my grandparents, my mom's parents, their home was a stone's throw away from a trailhead on the Appalachian Trail. So
Okay.
it was always one of those things where, when you're first taught it, you're first told, oh, there's a trailhead to the Appalachian Trail. Like, what's the Appalachian Trail? What's the big deal about that? And then you hear, and so as a kid, it always struck me as something that I would love to go out and accomplish. It would be a definitely incredible feat for me to get to do that. But that'd be my bucket list item.
Okay. Fun. Question for you. If you could take a road trip today with anyone, going anywhere, what would you drive? Where would you go? What would you talk about?
That's a great question. We've just lost my brother John in January of 20 and lost my dad in December of 2020. So 11 months later. And then my mom was this year on May the 28th. I like to grab all three of those because once you lose someone close to you, you realize how many questions that you have unanswered. I would grab all three of those and put them in a oh gosh, got to find a hot rod, right? So
yeah, for sure.
I was probably that new XM, that BMW XM, that 760 horsepower.
Okay.
So it'd either be that or the Cadillac Escalade V. I'd probably be the Cadillac Escalade V because that would really make my dad happy. He was a Cadillac man through and through. He loved his Cadillac. So yeah, we get that Cadillac Escalade V with all that power, and we go ourselves for a good long road trip. So I could get some, get those questions that, you think that they're always going to be there. And they're crazy questions. They're questions that I never even thought of until they're gone. But yeah, it's funny how that works. But I always encourage, we made, my wife and I spent the last 7 years living with mom and dad and helping out, when we could and things like that. And we did that so that we could enjoy those times and that we would have no regrets when they were gone. So it wasn't about time. And that's what I can't stress to people enough is it's never enough time. It's never enough time. Even if you spend every day with each other, it's never enough time. It's when they're gone is when you're going to come up with those questions. It's important to enjoy the loved ones you have and make the time for them and always say yes when they need you.
I appreciate that because that's really a little bit of this podcast came out of my parents died in 2014, 2015. And I turned to my brother who happens to be 9 years older. So I appreciate older siblings like you had. But I looked at my brother and I said, I've got 101 unanswered questions. I'm really glad you said that because I really encourage young people today that have their parents living or their grandparents living. You need to set them down. And you reference the questions. I don't even know who my dad's first girlfriend was. Maybe it was my mom. I don't know. I don't even know how they met.
Right.
And, I have some regrets there. And like you said, I always thought, well, there'll be tomorrow. There'll be tomorrow and I'll do it tomorrow. And of course, tomorrow didn't come.
Right. No, that's how it is. And I tell you, I count my blessings every day that my father was an identical twin for the simple fact that honestly, if I'm just like jonesing to hear his voice, I could call my Uncle Mario and I can hear my dad's voice and have a great conversation. And I tell you, there's been a couple of questions that I did have that my Uncle Mario could answer, right? Because he was a part of that life. They were together. So yeah, that's been very helpful. But yeah, I can't encourage people enough to spend that time with the loved ones, especially like you said, the grandkids, because it's just they want to share. Their grandparents are so excited to share things about their life, stories. And I mean, you can get any grandparent to sit there and talk to you for hours because they have so much knowledge. They have so much world knowledge, so much life knowledge. It's invaluable.
Absolutely. Adam, if you could give one piece of advice to a young racer, he's starting out, what would you tell him or her? We don't want to limit
make
it to no, we don't limit it to guys because there's some women out there
no,
today.
no. There's incredibly talented drivers, all of any shape, any race, religion, gender. It doesn't matter, and the same thing goes for them all. Like for me, it's what I've noticed about the sport is there's not a more inclusive sport. If you're willing to put in the work, you're willing to put in the effort, and you have that drive and determination, that this sport is one of those sports that will not turn their back on anyone that has that. I highly encourage, and I've had, young individuals that I've helped mentor that, I said, go knock on doors, I mean, they want to be a driver. That's great, but go knock on doors and get your foot in the door at a race team, sweeping the floors, working on the race cars, because when you're the whole package, it makes a difference. Also, that gives you the connections and things like that, and stuff can happen from that. And I've had proud reports come back to me of young men, young girls that have been very successful with those little tips. But honest to goodness, you just keep yourself in the mix, keep yourself in the circle. Don't ever give up. Work hard and be at the races. Out of sight, out of mind. If you're not there, you can't be there for an opportunity. And the hardest thing as a racer is to be a spectator. But it also shows anybody who owns cars, race cars that are looking for drivers, if you're not there to capitalize on the opportunity, then somebody else is going to get it. Those are the biggest things: is work hard at it, and be at the racetrack. Those two factors, you can't go wrong. Does that mean that it's going to guarantee you? No, it doesn't guarantee you anything. Life has no guarantees, but it does give you your best shot, I think.
Well, thank you for that. Enjoyed our little virtual road trip here. I know we're separated by miles, but thanks to technology, we could link up and ride around here.
Well, I appreciate it, Dan. I really enjoyed this, and thank you to the audience too for tuning in and your time and consideration here and listening to our story, and hopefully you found it helpful in some way or appreciate in whatever way. But nonetheless, Dan, it was a lot of fun for me, and I really appreciate you reaching out and wanting me to have, and I'm humbled that you wanted to have me on the show.
You're still a racer. Tell people how to find you, a charity, whatever you feel like you'd like to promote here at the end.
Our races is the Trans Am Series presented by Pirelli. Our races are televised on MAV TV. You can find us Trans Am Thursdays from 8 to 10. They'll be running Trans Am races every Thursday night. If I'm not driving, you'll hear my voice because I commentate. So
okay.
You get to hear my voice as a commentator if you don't get to see me out there driving. So that's also been fun for me. That's an opportunity that came through the Trans Am Series as well, and I've thoroughly enjoyed that. That's like watching a race with a friend of yours, and you just get to talk about it, and it, it's quite enjoyable. But yeah, you can find us there. I compete. I drive in the Big Machine Vaca Spike Coolers TA2 series. I drive the number 41 Ultimate Headers Chevrolet Camaro for Ultimate Headers Racing, and we love it. It's TA2. If you don't know it, it is one of the most competitive series in America, if not the world. We have 40 plus car counts, and the field is 20 deep. There's 20 cars that can win any given weekend. And those two key talents that I talked about earlier, Brent Cruz and Connor Zilich, I don't know if I mentioned them throughout the show, but this is where the talent is really coming through is the Big Machine Vaca Spike Coolers TA2 series. So tune in. We'd love to have you. Come to the races because the best part about our races is general admission ticket is full access to paddocks and pit area and all those places. So you can meet the drivers, you can meet the teams, you can get close to the race cars, smell the fumes, the heat from the exhaust pipes, and all that good stuff. And then also please support Check It for Andretti. That's a foundation that was founded while my brother was still alive. My sister-in-law Nancy, his widow, has taken the bull by the horns and runs the foundation. It's to support colorectal cancer. It's to ideally it's to provide colonoscopies for those individuals that either are at risk and can't afford it or the insurance won't cover it. Check It for Andretti will come in and they will pay for that rather pricey procedure to have done to give you the peace of mind and to give your family the peace of mind because it's all about early screening and early detection, and we can't encourage you enough to go check it for whoever you're going to check it for, but check it for somebody.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that'll give me, I usually go to Indy races, so I'll have to go to a Trans Am race this year. Now that I know a driver.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. Please come by, Dan. They're speed tour weekends. They're the most exciting. I mean, if you're into racing, it's SVRA, so the Sports Car Vintage Racing
Sure.
Association. So all the vintage cars, stuff that's, you got 30, 40, $50 million cars out there that are racing door to door, right? They should be in a museum, and they're not. They're out there with all this provenance and competing for trophies and stuff. So it's quite an experience there. And then obviously the Trans Am series, all the modern cars of the Trans Am series, F4, FRA, Formula Regional Americas. So the open wheel cars, and then the International GT, which is Porsches and Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Audi and all those wonderful GT3 cars. It is probably the most eclectic motorsports weekend, and I mean, I'm gonna tell you, it's not a budget killer either. It certainly could fit in any family budget out there. So I highly encourage, come on by, because they're great. They're great racing. Where do you live at, Dan?
I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio.
We run Mid Ohio.
Yep, we go up there every year for Indy. So now we'll go for Trans Am.
Love to have you. Please reach out when you do.
Yeah. Well, Adam, it's been a pleasure.
It's been mine, Dan. Thank you again.
Until we meet up again, you can find me on the internet at dantheroadtripguy.com. I hope you will follow this podcast so that you don't miss any upcoming episodes, and share it with your family and friends so that they can enjoy the stories of my guests also. Until we meet again on a future episode, keep having conversations with each other and keep driving.